Hi, it's Artem from KeenTools and welcome to this new tutorial about texturing with GeoTracker for Blender. So today I'm gonna show you how to bake texture taken from a tracked object in a clip onto the geometry. And also a couple of examples showing how helpful GeoTracker texturing can be when adding visual effects and CG elements to your shot. We're going to use this test shot to see the basic settings of the texture tab. This is a headset box demonstration in which it's shown from all sides. And as you see, that's already been tracked, so we have that box model doing exactly the same kind of motion in 3D space. So what GeoTracker can also do is create a texture by grabbing it from the tracked object and then bake it onto the 3D model. And this is how you do it. First off, you need to choose which frames you want GeoTracker to take the texture from. We're gonna try to find the best looking frames for each panel now. Let's pick this one for the front, then go to the Texture tab and press plus to add it to the Add Frames list. Then we'll go forward a bit and add a frame for the back. And then the left panel, and another one for the right panel. Obviously, for best results you need to avoid frames that are blurry or have something in the foreground that blocks the view of the box. And 2 more frames for the top and the bottom panels, and that makes 6 frames in total. I'm gonna exit pin mode. This is my 3D box, and now I'm gonna hit this Create Texture button, and that will project texture from the selected frames and bake it right onto the model. Here we go, our 3D box is now properly textured. Over here there's a gear icon, so if you click on it, it'll open the texturing settings. This is where you can set the size of your texture and a couple of other things like angle strictness and edges. And if you go to the Shading tab, you'll see that it has also created texture material nodes. Going back to layout, you can now make copies of this texture to 3D box or export the texture in one of the available formats and then use it externally for editing or other purposes. You can also delete the texture from your model with this button. The frames we used for snapshotting our texture are gonna stay though, so you can recreate it anytime. So these were the very basics of GeoTracker texturing in Blender. Now let's go ahead and see how we can use this technique for adding visual effects or CG elements to live action shots. Here's a shot in which I tracked camera using a very simple model of the cupola, which is this little tower-like structure on top of the building. You can also see a cube-like thing that's sort of cutting into one of the lower corners. You'll see what we need that for in a minute. And let's say I want to deform that cupola in some funny way, but I want to keep its texture throughout the shot. Let's find a frame that's sharp enough to give us a good texture. Click plus to add it over here and then hit Create Texture. Now we have it baked onto our 3D model. We can check how that looks on top of our shot in Material Preview. Now let's go to Rendered Viewport Shading. It looks pretty rough so far, also because of this cube right here. So let's select it and then go to Object Properties, scroll down to the Visibility tab and check Holdout. This way it's gonna serve us as a 3D mask and make this part of the building visible to us, because otherwise it would be hidden behind the cupola model. As you can see, right now it's kinda dark, so let's go to the Shading tab, turn on Rendered Viewport Shading and replace this principled BSDF node with Emission node. Now it's emitting light and looks good in our shot, but we need to deal with this black cutout over here, which is the inner part of our 3D model. So let's add a transparent BSDF and mix shader nodes, plug emission and BSDF to mix shader and Y them to material output. And then also add a geometry node, plug the back-facing output into mix shader FAC input, and there we go. We no longer see the inside of our model because we made it transparent. If we go ahead and render the current frame, we'll see nothing but our cupola. So we need to go to the Compositing tab, add a Movie Clip node, select our clip here, then insert Alpha Over between the render layers and composite nodes, and then plug the Movie Clip node into Alpha Over like this. And if we render the current frame now, we're gonna have all our elements put together in one nice image. So we can now go to Layout again, turn on Material Preview and do something about the shape of our cupola. Let's select a number of polygons here at the top, then press Ctrl plus a number of times till the selection grows like this, and then let's go to Camera View, turn on Proportional Editing Objects, then press S for scaling and make it swell, make it bend for example. Let's render the current frame one more time. Looks good. We can set the whole clip to render now. So that was an example of how we can use the GeoTracker texturing option to play with the shapes of the objects in the video while keeping their texture. Alright, here's a smooth Steadicam shot in which I tracked the camera using a number of pretty simple planes. So we have now a very primitive street geometry and camera animation here in 3D space. If we try to add a CG element to this shot, we'll likely want to have some natural looking reflections on it. Let's see how we can do it with the help of the GeoTracker texturing option. Let's go ahead and add the first and the last frames to our Add Frames list here in the Texture tab and hit Create Texture. Now our street geometry here becomes textured. Let's go to Add, Mesh, and add the monkey head, for example. I'm going to first go to Modify Properties, add Subdivision Surface, increase levels to 2, then right-click on Susan and apply Shade Smooth, just to make the effect we're going to apply more obvious. Now let's go to Shading, add a new material, turn on the Rendered Viewport Shading, make sure you use Cycles Render Engine and go all the way up with Metallic and go down with Roughness. Now I'm gonna select our street in the layers and replace this default material with the emission node to light it up. If you take a closer look at the monkey head, you'll see that the buildings on both sides of the street are now nicely reflected from its metallic surface. Let's go to Layout and turn Rendered Viewport Shading on to see what our shot is going to look like if it's rendered. And if you remember, this background here is not the actual clip, but the texture we projected onto our 3D planes. So it would be nice to see the actual video instead and keep all these reflections on our CG element. So let's create a new collection in our scene and call it Reflections. Then drag our street into it and move Susan into the main collection. Then we go here, add this indirect only filter and activate it for reflections. As you see, our street texture has disappeared, and what's left to do is go to Render Properties, scroll down to the Film tab and check Transparent. And that brings the original clip into the background. Maybe the only thing that's missing now is the blue sky reflection on Susan's surface. We can add that by means of an environment texture. Let's go to Shading, switch Shader Type to World, add an environment texture node, connect it to background, click on Open and load an environment texture that has a blue sky in it. This one also has some greens in it, so let's tweak it a bit. Let's add mapping and coordinate texture nodes. Do a bit of rotation here so that the sky is correctly oriented. And now let's insert a hue value saturation node in here and go down with the saturation, increase the value and adjust the hue. We'll need to composite it now, and we're not going to focus on that because it's compositing as usual, so we're going to go straight to rendering the whole sequence. This texturing technique is going to work for optical effects too. Let's duplicate the monkey head, move it to main collection, bring it forward, make it a bit smaller, and what we'll do now is change its material to glass. Let's go to Shading, select our second Susan, switch Shading Type to Object, remove this one and add Glass BSDF instead. As you see, the light emitted by a texture goes through this glass material and gets distorted the way it would normally do, and that creates a great optical effect on our CG element. So these were just a couple of examples of how GeoTracker texturing can simplify the process of adding visual effects to video. Download GeoTracker for Blender from KeenTools.io. Check out our other products, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about our new tutorials and streams. Thank you for watching and see you in the next videos.